In the past hours, increasingly alarming information has begun to appear around the conflict between the United States and Iran. These are reports circulating among military analysts, diplomatic sources, and journalists closely following the development of the situation in the Middle East. More and more sources claim that Washington may be preparing for the next, much more serious stage of the military operation, a possible ground invasion of Iranian territory. So far, there is no official confirmation of this. However, indirect signs and the growing tension in the region are leading many experts to say that the conflict may very soon move to an entirely new level. In recent days, satellite images and reports from the region have recorded an increase in the activity of American military forces in the Middle East. This involves the deployment of additional equipment, the reinforcement of military bases, an increase in the number of transport aircraft, and the movement of ships in the region. Such actions by themselves do not yet mean the start of a ground operation, but they are often considered preparatory measures that precede larger-scale military actions. It is precisely against the background of these reports that a new wave of concern has begun in global markets. The price of oil has started to rise sharply, and many analysts directly link this price surge to fears that the war could move into the stage of a full-scale conflict. If a ground operation is indeed launched, this could mean that the fighting will last for a much longer period and affect far more countries in the region. For energy markets, this is one of the most alarming scenarios. Iran is located at the center of one of the most important energy regions in the world. Any large-scale war on its territory automatically threatens oil routes, extraction infrastructure, and the transportation of energy resources. That is why every new report about possible escalation immediately triggers a reaction on exchanges. Analysts note that the rise in oil prices in recent days is largely connected precisely with expectations of further escalation. Investors and energy companies are beginning to price in the risk that the conflict could turn into a prolonged war. In such a situation, markets react in advance, trying to account for possible supply disruptions. But the economic factor is only one side of what is happening. Military experts warn that a ground operation against Iran could become one of the most difficult military campaigns in modern history. Iran is a huge country with a population of more than 80 million people, complex terrain, and a developed defense system. Any invasion of its territory would require enormous resources and could lead to a prolonged conflict. That is why more and more analysts are now trying to understand what strategic plan stands behind Washington's actions. In any military operation, the key question always remains the final objective. What exactly should be the result of this war? Some experts believe that the main task of the United States is to weaken Iran's military potential and destroy its missile infrastructure. Others assume that the goal may be to change the political balance in the region. And it is precisely this uncertainty that causes the greatest concern among international observers. Because history shows that wars started without a clearly formulated final objective often turn into long and extremely costly conflicts. Iraq, Afghanistan, and other military campaigns of recent decades remain clear examples of how difficult it can be to end a military operation once it has begun. Today, many analysts warn that the Middle East may be on the verge of an even more extensive phase of conflict. Hostilities between the United States and Iran are already ongoing, but so far they have been largely limited to strikes on military targets, naval skirmishes, and operations involving missiles, drones, and aircraft. Nevertheless, many experts believe that the current stage may be only a prelude to a much more serious phase of the war. Some Persian Gulf states are already on high military alert. Military bases are strengthening their defenses, air defense systems are placed on high alert, and diplomatic channels between various countries are operating almost around the clock. The reason is that further escalation could quickly draw new regional countries into the conflict. The main problem is that the Middle East remains a region where the interests of numerous states intersect. Any large-scale war here inevitably affects not only the immediate participants in the conflict, but also their allies, as well as the world's major powers. The economic consequences of the situation are already beginning to be felt. The rise in oil prices has become one of the first signals that the global economy is starting to react to the escalation of hostilities. If the conflict continues to expand or affects key energy routes, pressure on global markets could intensify even further. Experts are currently paying particular attention to military logistics. Any large-scale ground operation requires enormous resources, the movement of equipment, fuel, ammunition, and tens of thousands of troops. That is why analysts are closely monitoring the movements of U.S. military equipment and the strengthening of U.S. military infrastructure in the region. In recent days, there has been an increase in activity at military bases, growth in the number of transport aircraft, and an expansion of logistical operations through key bases in the Middle East. Such processes are often seen as preparations for potentially larger military actions. Many military specialists emphasize that a possible ground operation against Iran would differ significantly from previous conflicts involving the United States. Iran is a large country with a population of over 80 million people, complex geographic terrain, and a developed defense system. That is why experts warn that if the war enters the stage of large-scale ground combat, the conflict could be long and extremely complex. In such a situation, the consequences will be felt far beyond the region. Today, the attention of the entire world is focused on the next decisions of Washington and Tehran, because the next phase of this war may determine not only the fate of the conflict between the two countries, but the entire geopolitical situation in the Middle East. Additional concern is caused by the factor of international involvement. The longer the hostilities continue, the higher the likelihood that other major powers will be forced to respond more actively to the situation. Even now, diplomatic channels between leading countries are operating under high tension, and statements from world leaders are becoming increasingly cautious and measured. Equally important remains the issue of the security of maritime routes. The Strait of Hormuz and other key transport corridors in the region remain vital for global energy trade. Any serious disruption of shipping in these waters can trigger a chain reaction in global markets and increase economic pressure on many countries. Military observers also note the rise in activity of drone systems, missile strikes, and cyber operations, which are increasingly becoming part of modern conflicts. These methods allow parties to deliver tangible strikes without moving to a full-scale invasion. However, they also increase the risk of accidental incidents and unpredictable escalation. For this reason, many experts believe that the coming period will be critical for the further development of events. The decisions made in the near future may either contain the expansion of the conflict or, conversely, push it into an even more dangerous phase. The world is watching the situation closely, understanding that any new development can alter the balance of power far beyond the Middle East.